Hello and welcome to another installment of CIS1300. Today we're going to talk about media queries. Let's jump right into it. So, I've got the syntax of media queries here. Let's kind of talk about what they do first. Okay, so media queries are, you put them in your CSS, as you can kind of see by the text right here in the syntax. It goes preferably at the end of your CSS. You define all the CSS of your default size of your screen first. Okay, so as we've been saying previously, we're going to do a mobile first. So we're going to define all the styles for our mobile size first. And then once we finish that, we open up a media query. We create the media query and we start defining the next largest size. And then we change our style rules to fit the next largest size. And we finish that one, we make another media query for the next largest size until we've gotten all the sizes that we're going to do. And that will generally, it will be pretty much the same. You're going to do all of the sizes, but the amount of changes and things are kind of going to depend on what your audience base is. If your audience base is almost all mobile, you're going to spend less time on the larger sizes. You're going to do a little bit of work in there, make sure it's not completely broken, but you're not going to spend that much time on the larger sizes if you don't expect that much of your audience is going to be using a larger screen. You're just going to make sure that it's not broken, and then maybe use some more time if you have some time. We don't always have time, so that's where we're at. All right, so I have the syntax here, and I have a couple of links. So I have a link to my JS Fiddle that I made, a link to a nice CSS tricks page, which I may have to update that link. There's the JS Fiddle page. Yeah, I think I'm gonna update that link. Don't worry about it. I will update it. Okay, let's come back over here. And then last, I have the link to the developer page on Mozilla's website. Let's have a look at that real quick. Okay, so here is what Mozilla has to say about the app media query. Right, not really going to dive into here, just I link to it, and we're going to show you there's a lot of stuff in here. A lot of it is beyond our needs for this class. Are we at the bottom yet? At pretty much the bottom, it's going to show you the browser compatibility with all these different functions that are in there. The first line is really the one that we are concerned with today. So browser compatibility with the media query in general is the very first version of Chrome can do it. I think 12 is the first version of Edge. The first version of Firefox can do it. Internet Explorer 6, which, we don't even care about Internet Explorer anymore because there's Edge, and Edge is already being replaced with New Edge. Opera version 9, so that's pretty good. Safari 1.3, that's pretty good. And then some mobile browsers over here as well. So Firefox for Android since version 4, Chrome for Android since version 18, and they're up pretty high in numbers by now. I don't remember the exact numbers for the mobile browsers, but Chrome and Firefox on the desktop, and I think the mobile are at the same number. I think they keep them at the same numbers. They're around into the 70s now, and they've been doing fine with media queries since version 1, so no worries there at all. Okay, come back up to the top here. All right, so here's the basic syntax. It's the @ symbol, media, and then we do what type of screen. So our choices are going to be screen and print are the two primary ones that we're concerned about. I'm going to come back over to here and go to my next page here. So screen and print are going to be the two that we're worried about. We can use all. I don't recommend using all because that's going to mix in your screen and print together. And you kind of want, if you're going to do some print media query, you're generally going to do some specific print media queries. And the print screen size is going to be 8.5 by 11 primarily, and it's just not going to line up with your screen media query very well, because that's going to be all different sizes. So the print one is probably going to be different, so I would recommend against using all. So use print and screen. You can use only screen, just to be sure that, because there are other options, that projector is an option. I don't know what the other ones are. I primarily just use print and screen myself as well. And so print and screen, those are going to be your primary options for the target, or where you're going to put these media queries, or you're going to put the code that's inside of it. So we have a curly braces over here on the far end, and that's where we're going to put more CSS rules. Okay. Yeah. So next we'll talk about what sizes afterwards. So here, my example, I'm doing all screen, but I've changed the sizes. So the first one, and I've highlighted min width, max width, so you can really tell the difference, because it's a bit tricky the first time you see these. So add media, screen, and the and is important, and then in parentheses I put my values for the width of the screen. We're only concerned about the width of the screen because people scroll vertically. That's the way we scroll websites, so we're not really concerned about the height of the screen. We're only concerned about the width. So min width, or if it's a little easier to remember, any screen with a minimum width of this value, 900 pixels, or larger. So the minimum width or larger of 900 pixels. So this would be around a tablet size. Okay. And then the next one is max width. So up to a maximum of 899 pixels or smaller. Okay. Up to the maximum or smaller, and starting at the minimum or larger. So it's a bit tricky to remember these. If you start using them a lot, you'll figure it out. It's okay if you can't remember which is which. You'll always have to look it up. So be it. Okay. The internet is always on. If you're working on the web, the internet absolutely has to be always on. So just look it up. Okay. Don't worry. So that's how those work. And then I have a note down here that if I were to put these two together and say 900 pixels or longer, 899 pixels or smaller, put those things 1 pixel apart from each other. Because if I were to say 900 pixels or larger, and then another one with 900 pixels or smaller, that 900 pixel, if somebody actually has a screen width of 900 exactly, and I put it in both of them, they might have some problems. Okay, they might get, they're going to get whichever one you defined as last, because that's what CSS works. That's where the precedence comes in. So they're going to get whichever one you had last. But if you weren't expecting that, if you didn't plan for that, there's going to be a problem. And nobody's ever going to have half a pixel in there. Browsers can calculate in half a pixels and fractions of a pixels, but the screen is never going to be a fraction of a pixel. Okay, just because the browser can calculate that does not mean that it's ever actually going to display that on the width of the screen. Okay, so you're safe putting them 1 pixel apart. And then the idea behind putting them 1 pixel apart, aside from you not getting unexpected results on that 1 proper pixel in there, is it make you remember which one is which one. There's a firm line in there. There's not even 1 pixel of overlap. Okay, so that's a very good practice, so that there's no surprises for anybody on that 1 pixel, and it's very good practice so that you are fully aware and fully in control of how this is laid out. And my last one here is, if you want not X number of pixels or larger, or X number of pixels or smaller, but let's say you want inside of an area there. So in this case, I want from 600 pixels up to 899 pixels, and just in between those two values. So remember from the previous one, a min width of 900 pixels or larger. So in this case, I want 600 to 899, so I do a min width of 600 pixels. And then I close my parentheses, I do another and then I do a max width 899 pixels, and that's in parentheses as well. So the parentheses there, this is kind of very reminiscent of a CSS rule because we're in CSS, so of course it's going to follow the syntax of CSS. So I have min width 600 px and max width 899 pixels. And just going to be in between those things. So that's very good if, let's say, I only had 3 primary screen sizes to worry about. So I'm starting mobile first, so I start on the small side, and I define everything without a media query for the mobile, and then let's say mobile I want it to start at 600 pixels for the next largest size, and I want that to stop at 899. I define the next largest size in there, and then I come back to a min width of 900 or larger for my last one. So I have a small, medium, and large at that point, and I can ignore this middle one right here. Okay, but if I only wanted 2 sizes and I wanted to define them at 900 pixels, then I would just use this first one and the second one, or I would actually just use one only. So define all my small screen size rules first, and then I put a media query for all my large changes. So the vast majority of things are not going to change. Things like colors, borders, margins and paddings may not change if much. The layout of all that stuff is not really going to change. The things that are going to change are maybe I'm going to move my sidebar, or change the value of my sidebar, change my font sizes, change some positioning things, maybe some font sizes, maybe some other box sizes and stuff to fit more or less text in them. Those are the things that's going to change. The color and all that stuff is not going to change. So everything is defined in the first case without any media query, and then for the larger screen sizes, I only put the changes. I'm not going to redefine everything because that's more work for the CSS. So if I say my header's background color is going to be red in the main part of the CSS for the small screens, and then I come into the media query for larger screens and I say, okay, the header of my header background is going to be red. It's going to go into the first one. It's going to do that background color of red, and then it's going to come back down to the media query and it's going to do it again. Okay, and now that's a very small thing, but it's going to add up. If you're doing all of them on every page, it's going to do everything twice, and the browser will slow down. Okay. We don't want that, so we only want to define the changes in the media query, not redefine everything. Okay. Moving on, how do we determine which screen sizes we need to write? Where are breakpoints? In my previous example right here, I just had a 900 pixel breakpoint and a 600 pixel breakpoint. Well, where did I get that information? So here, and I have a link down at the bottom here to a nice article that was written up where somebody went and they found all the common screen sizes that people were using on phones and tablets and desktop browsers and even larger screens. And they put all these things onto a chart, and they said this first part of the chart right here, this is where some common breakpoints are. So they took this popular screen size and put a breakpoint right there. Take this popular screen size, put a breakpoint right there, and so on. They took the most popular screen sizes and put a breakpoint right at those and said, okay, now I'm going to define bigger or smaller of all these things. And that's just a wrong-headed idea. Why would you define your breakpoint right at a screen size? Okay, so this next chart takes we're going to wipe all those out, and we're just going to put the dots in for all the screen sizes, and we're going to find the groups. Okay, so we have a group of small ones right here, a couple of portrait tablets right here, one landscape tablet right here, a few good-sized desktops, and then way off to the right we have a large desktop size. Okay, let's put our breakpoints in between the groups. All right, so we have a 600 900, 1200, and 1800 pixel lines in between all these common sizes. So this is the 1200, right? So somewhere over here is going to be the 1024, the classic old-fashioned screen size. Somewhere over here is going to be 1024. Right? I didn't put a line right at 1024. I put a line somewhere after it, okay? But before the next common sizes. So we have 1280, 1366, 1400, 1600, and then there's a gap. And then the new breakpoint of 1800, and way over here is going to be the 1920, the really big screens that some folks have maybe in their office. A few people probably have them at home. And if we're starting at the small size with all our CSS, by the time we get down to that 1800 screen size, we're like, this is 0.1% of our audience population. Let's just make sure it's not broken. Make sure it doesn't look totally wonky all over the place. We have just a couple of CSS rules in there, and we're pretty much good, okay? But then all these other ones, we've now broken it apart in between all of the screen sizes, okay? Not at any particular ones. We don't want to do that. So I've mentioned again here, don't put your breakpoints at the 1024 like the classic screen size. Originally, that's what myself and a lot of people were doing. Like, hey, that's a classic screen size. Let's put a breakpoint there so that we know where it is. Bad idea. Okay. So 6, 9, 12, and 1800 pixels. That's a really common one. And so I've listed them over here with the media queries. So if you're going to use these things, and these are the same things from the example right here. You can get the same exact ones here. That person wrote some media queries. I wrote the same media queries. Of course, they're going to be the same, right? Because that's how media queries work. That's how you write them in the syntax. So the green ones are all the single value ones with just a min or just a max. And then these 3 red ones I've highlighted, they have a min and a max. So remember, if it has a min and a max, it's inside of the min-max size right there. And so that's going to be, in this case right here, for tablet portrait only. So the tablets, when held in portrait, sometimes you want some bit of styling rules that are just for that one, not for all the screen sizes small up until that one, not for that one and all the bigger ones, just for that one. Sometimes you might want 1 or 2 rules in there, or whatever number you want, a few rules in there. So we have that. Tablet landscape, the same thing. We have a set of rules just for tablet landscape in case we need some just for that. And then regular desktop size only, we have some just for that. And then the large 1800 and up, that's going to be all just for them as well, because there's no 2 sizes up there. And the same thing with the phone size. There's no 2 sizes in there. Sure, there's a few different phone sizes, but we're doing one set of rules for all the phones. They're very similar. They're only about 100 pixels or so different than each other. It is quite odd that you may be thinking, hey, but my phone has like 2200 pixel resolution. When it comes to the web, it's going to take a 500, 400, 600 or so pixel website, scale it up into that 2200 pixel, and display it actually at a much smaller resolution, somewhere in the 400 to 500 range. So we've broken it down to 600 pixel is the cutoff line because it's just after all of the phone sizes. So all the phone sizes can be the same. We're just going to make sure big phones, we want them to scroll vertically. We're not going to have sidebars, none of that fancy stuff. Those are for larger screens that have the room for it. Okay, so all the phones are going to display differently, of course. So I've got my JS fiddle, and I'm going to come over and have a look at that. Okay, so first I'm going to show you the HTML of it. Okay, it's pretty simple. I just have a page, a div for the page that wraps around everything. I have a header with an H1 tag. That's it right here. Just says business name and logo. Okay, I'm not putting in fancy stuff in there. Okay, then I have a main area which encompasses both my sidebar and my content. Right, we've gone over this before, right? So then I have my sidebar next. Then there's a menu in there. an unordered list with 4 items in there. I didn't put any hover effects in there or anything. That's not what we're doing this week. I just put the plain old list in there. Okay. If you want to go back over the hover effects, look at that assignment. And then next is the content, and then I put another div inside of it for article. I didn't actually use it in this example, but it's in there anyway. Same thing with the main content. I separated the header out just a little bit, and I just put a whole bunch of paragraphs with Phil Lorem Ipsum in there. Nothing fancy there. Closed all those div tags except for the page, and I have a footer at the bottom with just a copyright or a copy left mark in here, and then I closed the page. Okay, so very simple page, very common. It's a standard layout that we've been working with all semester. Okay, and I've started in the mobile view. Actually, if I shrink this up a little, this is the mobile view. Okay, and I've used from the previous slide earlier, I've used all the same exact cutoff points in the media careers, all the same breakpoints. So mobile is 599 and below, tablet is 600 to 900, desktop is 900 to 1200, and oh no, that's tablet landscape is 900 to 1200, excuse me. Desktop is 1200 to 1800, and big desktop is 1800 and below. Okay. Remember, there's 1799 in there, not just 1800. Remember those. And then I've coded this header tag, header element. The background of it is going to start at red in mobile size, and as it gets bigger, it's going to go orange, yellow, green, cyan, blue, indigo, violet, for all those spots in there. And you're going to see that some of them don't actually happen. Okay, so I've zoomed out my page a little bit, so that I can actually stretch this all the way up to 1800, even though with all the other stuff going on here, I don't have 1800 pixels, but I zoomed it out a little bit, so now I do. Okay, so I'm going to zoom this, or I'm going to grab this and drag it, so you'll see there we go, right at 600 and 599. I skipped orange and went from red to yellow. Okay, we'll get back to that. And then I'm going to go all the way up to 900. Slowly, no changes. Okay, 900, I skipped green and went right to cyan. Okay, and then go up to 1200, no further changes. I skipped blue and went to indigo. Okay, that's indigo, trust me. And then all the way to 1800. Will I make it? I won't make it. Let me zoom out one more time. I'll zoom out one more time. There we go. And trust me, that's violet. That's the internet violet color. Okay. So what colors did I skip? I skipped blue. I went from cyan to indigo, right? Okay. And I skipped green. I went from cyan to yellow. And I skipped orange. Went from yellow to red. Okay, so I skipped orange, green, and blue, right? Let me go back to the normal screen size so we can better read all this text, okay? And we'll have a look at what the code is in here, okay? Have a look at what I put in here. First, I did my border box sizing, okay? Very important. I want my box sizing to be border box all the time. Otherwise, things are unpredictable to me. So that's my first step. We're very used to that. All right. Next, I have a little bit of I have a link right here, which I have on my last slide we didn't get to yet, that explains this long formula over here. We're going to ignore it for now. It's font size. Okay, it's not what we're talking about yet. We'll come back to it. I have my page, header, main, sidebar, and content. All of these, they all are pretty much the same. They're inline block, they're relative. Most of them are going to be with 100%, with the exception of the content and the sidebar, which this sidebar actually and the content start at 100%. in the mobile size. And then they all have their own background colors, and the header actually is background color of black, which we didn't see at all, right? So this is without any of the media queries. I said the background color is black. Remember, I said don't do this, but for my example, I did it anyway, so you can see really what happens. Okay, so all of these mostly the same, mostly the things that we've seen before. It's a standard layout with a sidebar and a main area and a header and a footer. Okay, no surprise that I didn't put any fancy stuff. I think I only have padding on a couple of them. Okay, then all the media queries are down here. Okay, first one is for phone only, and this is where my header background color of red. Let me scroll over to background color of red. This is where that comes in. This is why you never saw the black background color, because I have a color in all of the media queries, and the media queries encompass all of the possible screen sizes. So I wrote black in for nothing. So without all my media queries in this example, all that is potentially overwritten, and specifically all the colors are overwritten. So red header for mobile size. For the page, I've given it some margin and padding and some width. So on mobile size, you'll see there's a little bit of padding on either side. The width here. So no padding, but I've changed it with the width. 100% minus 2 REMs. Remember, the REMs are the base EM for the page before you get into any changes. Okay. So that's where I have this little bit of space right here, and margin 0 auto, so it is centered the entire page. That's this white border. This one's a little bit longer because it's a JS fiddle. Okay, no worries there. And the next size, portrait tablet or tablet portrait, and everything larger. This is where it said background is orange, but we never saw orange. This starts at 600 pixels. So I'll zoom up to 600 pixels. We went right from red to yellow, and that's because the next media query is tablet portrait only, and it doesn't take precedence because it's because it has the two things. That's not what caused it to take precedence. It's because I wrote it after I wrote the other one. It's physically after the other one. So we'll go all the way back up to the header. What the CSS does is it reads all of them and it executes all of them as they happen. So first the header background gets made black, and then it comes down to this first media query and says, are you this size? If yes, now color is red. And then I get, now I'm in a different size. So then we come to this next size and it says, are you this size? Min width of 600 pixels. Well, yes, I am, because I am 608 pixels. Okay, so it makes it orange. And then it continues reading and it says, are you between 600 and 899? Well, I already know I'm at 608 right at this second. So yes, and it says, okay, the header background is yellow. So the orange never happens in this case because I overwrote it just a few lines later with yellow. Okay, and this is for tablet portrait only, so I have some specific code for tablet portrait only. Now in my example, I'm just changing the background header over and over again and all these things so that you have a visual checkpoint right there so you can see what all these are. And if you're putting some layout code and stuff, some CSS rules that fix layout nuances and things, you're not going to be overriding the same thing like this that I am. But in here, I want a very obvious visual cue for you. All right. So this gets overwritten, and the orange got overwritten by the yellow, right, as we've intended. And if I zoom this up to the 900, all right, I should go from yellow to green, but I actually go from yellow to cyan, and I have some other changes as well. But the reason I went from yellow to cyan is the same reason that I skipped the orange. So I have my min width of 900. It changed the header background green, but just below, in between 900 and 1199, I've changed it to cyan. Because I wrote it below, it's going to do the first one, and then it's going to do the second one, and the second one is going to be what's left. Okay, so for the header color, these other changes, they don't get overwritten because I didn't override them with anything. And this is where I change my sidebar. So the sidebar goes from being in line above the content to being next to the content. And a change that I did in the sidebar that's different than some previous sidebars I've showed you is instead of a percentage width, I gave it an EM width. So it's going to be the width of a character string, 15 characters wide. And for the content area, I gave it the margin of 15 characters, the same exact margin, which you should have in there. And this means that as I scroll to even larger screen sizes, because I'm going to have a sidebar from everywhere from 900 pixels all the way up to 2200 pixels with somebody with a really large screen. And if I first tell them, hey, just use 20%, then 20% on a 900 pixel screen might look like the right amount. But on a 2200 pixel screen, now 20% is a lot, and it's a lot of wasted space. So I've instead opted for the EM width, which makes my sidebar the right width that it needs to be for that font size. And as the font size changes, actually I should probably even do an REM or something perhaps, right? But as the font size changes, the width will even change. So I actually need to make sure that my content and my sidebar, the parent classes there, have the same font size. Otherwise, they may either grow some space in between them or begin to overlap each other if one is larger or smaller than the other in font size. I've not gone into too much crazy stuff with the font size in this page, so they are, of course, they are the same and they line up perfectly. But if you're making a much more complicated page, this is something you'll need to keep an eye on if you're using the EM width. But remember, the EM width is a great tool to use because then you get widths that are universal. They're accepted within that particular font size that you're using instead of a percentage width, which is just a percent of the screen size. And anybody can have any screen size, right? The EM is much more predictable. So moving on to the next sizes. So I'm in cyan because I'm in that landscape width. And then I only have color changes beyond this. So the 900 pixel area, this is where I changed and I went from the mobile sidebar content in line with each other to the desktop size of sidebar actually on the side and the mobile, in the main area actually on the side. So that's where I did that change, and this is going to be where you do your changes in your upcoming project as well. Is it going to be around the 900 pixel size for your homework assignment? I want all different numbers because I don't want you to copy mine. For your next resume assignment, I do want you to use these real sizes because I want you to be able to use this resume if you choose to after the class as a real resume. So I want you to use real sizes for that. Let's have a look. Yes, let's have a look at the last slide I have for you, which talks about that font size formula that's in there. So the link goes to the CSS tricks page that's about fluid typography. And when we're using media queries and we're worried about changing screen sizes, we also need to be concerned about the font size. So on the mobile size, the font size should be different than on the desktop size. And large screens have a tendency of having very small fonts, and then people have to put their face really close to this really big screen. It doesn't make any sense. So we actually do want a smaller font size sometimes on the mobile and a larger font size on the desktop. But with the media queries, we actually have the option of doing a multitude of screen sizes, and we can change for all these breakpoints. But here I found a pretty nice write-up on CSS tricks. You could read the whole thing if you like, or I've copied out the meat and potatoes of it, which is the formula We'll go over it real quick. It's a slightly complex formula, but it's all simple math because the calculate function in CSS can only do plus, minus, times, and divide. That's it. So it's simple in that respect, but there's a number of things in here, and there's some parentheses in that. But suffice to say that you can put the minimum font size here in pixels, okay, and then in the next parentheses you do the minimum size minus, or excuse me, the maximum size minus the minimum size without pixels, without any units, and then you have a times and some more parentheses, and you do a standard 100 viewport width minus the minimum viewport width, all of that divided by the maximum viewport width minus the minimum viewport width. So two similar formulas where you have a number plus a parentheses of a max minus a min. Okay, if that helps to simplify it. And I put an example here that I've used in my JS Fiddle, which was a minimum size of 16 pixels and then a maximum of 20 without the unit, 20 pixels though, 20 minus 16. So you could just write 4, but for future sake, we're going to write the 20 minus 16 so that we know what the maximum size is and what it represents. Okay, and then all that times, or not all that, but just times 100 viewport width, so 100% the viewport width, that's in there, that's a static number, that doesn't change in this formula, minus 599 pixels, which is the minimum size that I'm concerned with, that's the mobile cutoff size, divided by 1200 being the maximum one that I'm particularly concerned with. The 1800 pixels and larger, I'm not going to change in this formula, although I probably could. I could just change this out for an 8, and that's going to be minus that same 599 from before. So if you just copy and paste this and put this into the bulk of your page for the font size like I've got here, let me switch over again. So I have this in my fiddle right near the top, so page, and I just put that right in there. And as I bring this larger and smaller, the font size barely changes because it's only a 4 pixel change between 600 and 1200 pixels wide. So a 600 pixel spread only changes 4 pixels in each character. But it's just enough to make sure that it's very easily readable. Okay, and you just throw that in there and just leave it in there really. And this fairly long function in here, mathematical function, pretty long, but it will ensure that your font will never be below whatever the minimum size is and will never be above whatever the maximum size is, and it will do that from the minimum and maximum screen sizes that you input as well. Okay, all right, and that is everything for today's presentation. Be sure to have a look at your next assignment. I'm going to actually make a second video for the next assignment, so tune into that if you want to see the assignment. Okay.